pumpers, and I cannot wait to see it in this dungeon as we finally get going. Dinah, we're going to see some big pulls here. We're going to see some absolutely huge pulls, and those Mistweavers are going to be popping off. What is it specifically that we're going to be looking for with those Mistweavers in terms of that AoE healing on the big pulls?
I mean, so you look at it on the surface of it, and it's you press Y the crane, you spin to win, right? But there's actually a decent amount of nuance that goes into pressing spinning crane kick smile. Um, with like what we should be looking for as well is I believe Zalia's playing Sunrise Technique is for him to be getting those rising sun kicks in even during his Y the crane because it gives that debuff on the mobs and on priority mobs as well as much as anything else, which adds a lot of damage to any individual mob that he wants to kill, as well
It's
as amplifying the healing.
it's very true. Now we do see them getting on to Sky Captain Krog here. Now the key level is, I don't want to say it's on the lower side, but it's on the lower side of what these guys are used to playing on. Typically, you'll see your healer stay all the way out. They'll be baiting those spits, and then they won't be worrying about necessarily doing as much damage. I'm curious to see if any of our Mistweavers do decide to run into my play a little bit more offensive, because again, Mistweaver single target, it's not the biggest damage that we've seen, compared to those paladins, compared to those disc priests, but it's still very valuable, and especially in a competition setting like this, if you have three DPSs who are of equal skill on both teams, that healer damage can do an absolute truck ton of damage. And like you say, we do have some healers who tend to play a lot more offensive. Looking at the gear that some of them have on, we've got this really big spread of the Mistweaver gear with the corruption especially. So some of them are tending to play into the oozing blood traits, and they're just going very much heavy offensive, as much damage as I can do. I'm pretty sure that Zalia playing that build.
He's playing. He's got at least one gushing wounds on. I don't know what the rest of his corruption is at the moment, but he's doing a decent amount of damage. Look, like he's doing about 35k single target, which is pretty decent, really. And as you said, when it comes down to the difference, like small time gains here and there, like that's where you're going to make up your time.
It definitely is. One of the very interesting things that I saw yesterday was just the difference between the Mistweavers and the way they approach the healing side of it. Like I said, Zalia, very offensive healer. JB tends to play more on the defensive side. Zmok just wants to kill things. To be perfectly honest, he just wants to see him dead. Whatever he plays on, he's going to be hitting these mobs like a truck. We see MethodEU now going into the second boss area. They're going to pull a little bit of trash first. They're probably going to try and get it into the boss. Maybe they need a little bit more time to get the cooldowns, or maybe they're just going to be going straight into the boss with this.
I wouldn't be surprised to
Uh,
see them going straight into the boss. To be honest, it's as you said, it's a fairly low key for them. I mean, it's a 17. It's not high, but it's not low, right? And these pulls add a lot of danger, obviously, but they are going to pull it all into the boss, and I'm excited to see how this pull goes.
Now, this build is going one of two ways. One is going to go beautifully, one is going to go terribly. Those Mistweavers with spinning crane kick, though, they are going to be doing a metric time. I mean, just look at Zalia. Look at it. He's pushing one button to do that. It's absolutely beautiful to see. And on Mira's side, doing an absolutely monumental amount of damage, being backed up there by Fragments as well. He's getting the magic buff from Fragments. That's going to be amplifying his damage. They just make it look easy. They make it look like they've done this 20
Yeah.
billion times before. Maybe because they have,
Well,
but
I mean, maybe they have. Yeah.
maybe. I'm curious to know what they're going to do next because we haven't seen teams play around with the Awakened Affix in this dungeon specifically. And there's a couple of options that you can do here. You can go back and you can go into the event area. You can use that to skip more trash, or you can head straight towards the Ring of Booty. You can progress the dungeon forward. You really want to make sure you're not double backing, though. That's something that a lot of teams do. Seems like MethodEU are just going to push ahead here. They're going to try and play as many lieutenants on the final boss as possible, be as efficient as they can with that. I think I saw Gingy going off to the side there, just making sure the events already started ahead of time. Now hanging back as well. Maybe they're going to be doing something a little big here. I'm curious to see where they're going with this. But they're having multiple people do multiple different things, everything converging in the middle. Let's see what they end up pulling.
Yeah. So this looks like just another. Like I don't want to say standard big pull, but like trash pull into Ludwig. Obviously, you've got the Unholy DK is going to put a monumental amount of damage into that single target as well from all of these mobs. And I mean, it's just a very efficient way of pulling it, right? You've got to get your count, you've got to get your bosses down, and you've got to go through the RP. And just doing it all at the same time makes so much sense.
Definitely. And I think one of those things that people don't necessarily think about with Unholy DKs, like you look at the damage and you look at Mirez, and he is just doing an absolutely absurd amount of damage right now. But what he's actually doing is very high single target prio. So he is essentially attacking one target, and then when he's attacking that target, all of his bursting swords, I believe, his pustules are exploding on everything else and doing a massive amount of AoE damage. But it's all prio focus single target because then that explodes back onto the mob itself. And so this is why you'll see Gingy and Fragments, for example, in a pull like that. They'll just hold back a little bit. They'll go, okay, you know what? You can be the star of the show for this pull. We're just going to pull off a little bit, let you do as much damage as you can possibly do, and then we're going to assist you later on. Now we do see them going in here, pulling the Spirit Breaker tank mob. I cannot remember his name, but this one on the final boss can be an absolute nightmare for tanks, especially when you combine it with all of the other lieutenants that we have going on. I'm not 100% sure if I would have done this now. I maybe would have tried to get a little bit more trash count first and then use that to skip all the way to the final boss. But that probably just means that they're planning on doing the mobs at the end of the bridge, maybe dragging them up into the final boss as well, just to round off that final bit of count they need.
See, I quite like this pull because it means that they are doing something useful while the RP for Trothak is going on, right? He takes a while to spawn, as you can see, but it means they're doing something and they're making that final boss just that little bit easier, as you said, removing the Spirit Break and the heavy amount of tank damage that comes in. But we do see Inertia have already pulled Trothak and are slightly ahead, though I don't believe they have done the Commander that we just saw that Method EU just did.
They haven't done that. It's intriguing to see the way that they're looking about this because we've seen in practice certainly teams pulling, and in the time trials, this was just sort of the flavor of the month thing to do, was pull all four lieutenants onto the final boss. But that's a hell of a lot of damage. That's a hell of a lot of abilities to deal with at the same time. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't
I mean,
think they're
it's
going to be ballsy enough to do it. But if they do and they pull it off, that's going to be a huge advantage for them.
I mean, it's the risk reward, isn't it? Like it's very inconsistent. As you said, it's great for time trials when you have as many attempts as you want. You play for doing everything perfectly, but in a tournament setting and single elim in a direct race against another team, I don't think you can afford to go for that inconsistent pull unless it is your hail mary.
I think you know what? Looking at what they're doing, they're not going back. They're not
Yeah,
thinking, let's look at one of these attempts behind. They might just be going for it. You know what they might be saying? They might be saying there's enough trash count. I think it's about 40% in total in this area, plus the lieutenants as well. Currently they're behind on trash compared to MethodEU, but they are in the actual area they need to be to get all of that trash. It's all in one place. They could do this absolutely massive pull. It looks like they're gonna go. It looks like they're gonna go for this. I
so they're
can't
going
quite
for
believe
it. Yeah.
that we're actually gonna see this from Inertia. They are coming in fighting and saying, "Hey, MethodEU, you know what? We've seen what you can do yesterday. Let's show you what we can do. We're gonna do all that stuff that you did in the time trials and more." I'm stunned. I'm
This is
completely
huge.
stunned they're trying this.
I mean, they've not used lust up until this point in the dungeon, so they've got it ready for now. Like they're 8 minutes in, and they're using their first lust. Obviously, they're only going to get one in with this strategy, but everything is melting. Well, all the ads are. The Spirit Breaker mob goes down, which is a big weight off their shoulders, and it looks like they're as long as they can stay. Oh no, Fu goes down. Unfortunately. Let's hope they can get him rezzed up and back in the fight very quickly. And it looks like they have, and it doesn't look like they've been too unstable after the death.
That's a lovely thing about this comp as well, is that because KSM has locked it to one spec per per class, so you can't have two unholy DKs, for example. We're seeing a lot more variation in the classes. We're seeing those DHs come in which have the immunity. We've got monks which have excellent defensive tools. Fu dropping a little low here, maybe struggling slightly on the tail end once that way the cranes come out. But you've got
Yeah.
all sorts of tools that you can use to deal with the fears, for example. That tends to be the big thing that gets people. Good job, Trell, though living that tank mob. Like MethodEU even decided we're not going to take that risk. We're not going to play it on that final boss. That's the specific mob that we are scared about. We're going to remove that out. And Charles just goes, you know what? I'm going to do it. I believe in my healer. And sure, little slip up there with the death, but that's fine. The rest of the team said we're going to pop the defensives. I'm sure there was some excellent health pot usage there. They're just playing really well. I,
Yeah,
I, I
really
am
well
really
played
looking
from
forward
them.
to seeing how the rest of this game goes. They
That was
basically need to
massively
clear this up.
impressive, yeah.
If you look at the trash
Like,
count as well, they do appear to be again slightly behind. But if you look over at that pillar there, they've got a bunch of trash there. They've pulled a few mobs into the boss now. I'm pretty sure they will have mapped this out to be perfect on count, but they are in a really strong position at this point compared to MethodEU, and I wonder if MethodEU are maybe looking at their screen and being a little bit concerned right now because we do see some deaths on the MethodEU side. We were so focused on this big pull, we didn't even notice that going on there. MethodEU now in the final boss room, they're going to be doing the same pull, only minus the one lieutenant which they killed earlier. Maybe MethodEU will try and pull some extra trash into this. I'm not sure if they'd want to do that because I mean that pull is pretty tricky, but we see Inertia pulling those final bits of trash in now. Does Messi have their bloodstone available, or have they just popped it there? Just trying to look on the
I
frame.
think they've not got it available, I don't think, but I mean, I'm just staggered by what Inertia are doing here. They've made amazing use of the painful motivation from the mobs around the area to help kill off the trash. They've used the bombardments that the boss does, again, to help kill off more bits of trash, and they're coming in and they're finishing off this pull by the looks of it with no, I mean, no major issues, right? They had a death, that they had a couple of scary moments as the fear mob was left alive, but that is an astounding freehold coming out from Inertia.
Without a doubt, these guys have absolutely just started tearing up the dungeon and really capitalizing off of the wipe that we saw from Method EU. So, very good job on the side of Inertia to be able to take fleshed out dungeon for both of these teams, and it's going to be taking some very high risk pulls for them to pull through. Dina, Sierra, let's take it away. Game number 2 in Under.
Okay, here we go. Both teams starting at the same time now. Big pull coming out from Inertia. They're probably going to be going for a skip on the lieutenant afterwards, but they have to get through this one pull first. Again, you look at the damage meter. Undead not doing quite as much as I would expect him to do. He's still doing pretty well. Maybe he's saving his cooldowns. I'm not sure why he'd do that, but maybe he's saving them for the boss and they're going to try and do something on the boss, which would be interesting to see.
Um, I mean, 800, 900k is still a hefty amount of damage coming out from him.
Oh, it's still
So
pretty good. It's not 2 million though, is
is
it?
it? It's not. No. Okay. Not impressive enough for you. That is unfortunate.
Method
Yep.
you
As you
choosing to
said,
not
they
do
are.
that though.
Yeah, they're both teams skipping the lieutenant by the looks of it and going straight into the boss, which I mean, it's going to speed up their time through the dungeon, right? But as long as they can handle the lieutenant in the last boss, which I feel like they should be able to. So yeah, using the shroud and invis, or to invis them through the quite scary mask pull with the matrons in on the bridge there.
Definitely choosing not to pull any trash into the boss. Kind of inconvenient to do that. We saw it very early on in the expansion, people messing around in MDI season with pulling those ticks in. They're just choosing to focus down this boss, make sure that he goes very clearly. What I do want to focus on, and again, this is something which when you have mirror matches, it's very easy to hone in on little things like this. The healer damage, comparing the tank damage as well. If you look at these individual people compared to each other, you'll see that Zalia's playing way more offensively. He's able to put in a lot more damage. I'm pretty sure he is still going for that big corrupted blood build, just making things die quicker. And ultimately, that's what you want to do. Bethany, you here, not quite going for the pull I thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to be going for a big Cragmore run pull, but maybe they're just holding back, getting their cooldowns back off cooldown, just making sure they've got everything ready, getting those defensives. Because if you don't have the defensives, that pull is going to go just horribly.
Yeah, though they have had to commit the life cocoon for here, though, which kind of goes against the whole doing a big pull in the next room, because life cocoon is a couple of minutes cooldown. It's not huge for the tanks, but it is an extra cooldown that they won't have going into Cragmore's room. So I feel like they're gonna take it fairly slowly. They're gonna do maybe 2 pulls before the boss, or like 1 trash pull into the boss, but it looks like they're rounding up a lot here. Yeah, they're not pulling it all into the boss, but they are doing a big pull nonetheless. And let's hope they can not die, really.
I mean, that is the aim of the game. Generally speaking, dying is pretty bad for you in any context. Going for a nice pull here, trying to see. Are they going to add any more to this? This is like a relatively small pull, to be honest. I was kind of expecting something bigger from Inertia coming out of
Coming
that
out of
big
the
pull there
freehold, yeah.
from the freehold. Maybe they're just playing it a little safe. But I don't think that's the play. Like I think they should
I
be just going for it and just pulling as much as they can.
Yeah, they've got a game in hand. They've kind of, this is their pick, right? They've kind of got no reason to hold back, right? Like I feel like they should just be going for it, as you said, right? Like they take the Hail Mary, they go for it, they play risky, they play to win, as opposed to maybe playing to not lose, which is not necessarily the right thing to be doing. Though it does look like they're rounding up for a big pull and taking it into Cragmar here. So I guess they're clearing out a few like small, maybe the mobs they were having issues with in practice, and then doing a big pull into the boss with Bloodlust, as we have just seen that being popped by them.
They do pop up Bloodlust, and they are going to pull a hefty amount of trash into the boss. They're not going for a small pull by any means.
Oh,
Putting that up
Trell.
nice and. Unfortunately, Trell does go over there. Quick combat res out by Undead. Maybe getting Drastic to taunt the boss real quick, just so he can pop his defenses, make sure nobody dies. They have managed to get that nice and stable very, very quickly. Could have been a very sketchy situation, though, especially on this tyrannical setting. They managed to deal with that. However, they will not have that safety net later on in the dungeon. If they make that mistake again, then they will not have any kind of backup, and they're going to have to wipe. And when you end up with these later bosses pulling trash into the boss, and maybe if they're planning on doing lieutenants on the final boss as well, that could mess them up in a not nice way.
Yeah, it's always like these dungeons, you play them to be perfect, right? You plan all of your cooldowns, you plan your route around the assumption that you don't wipe, obviously, because why would you plan on wiping? So you've got to play to that, and as soon as something sort of falls apart, you run the risk of having just this cascading snowballing effect of everything going wrong. And credit where credit's due as well. Inertia, they have had Trell dying on both this boss and also what you saw at the end of the Freehold, but they have recovered without anyone else dying, which is that's fairly impressive in this setting as well, to be able to recover that quickly and without any lasting consequences, such as losing a DPS for the rest of the fight, right?
I mean, it's definitely not something that's easy to do. Like, if you have a mistake like that, that can get in your head, especially when you're playing live and you know that there's people watching. It can absolutely mess with you, but they're staying nice and cool. We see MethodEU finishing up the boss here now. Just trying to get my POV sorted because I am definitely behind on my screen. Can you fill for a second whilst I get these up?
Yeah, they look like it looks like they've both killed the boss within a few seconds of each other, and then they're going into the obelisk with their spirit breaker lieutenant, and they're gonna be kiting this down, I imagine, to the to the patrols of skeletons, and maybe do a pool of all of those and possibly bring them into a couple of the worms as well for the count that they need. But it looks like they're also waiting for cooldowns as well, or like holding cooldowns, obviously, because you don't want to really use it on one mob when you could be using your cooldowns on, like, 10 or 15.
Definitely, they're both doing something very similar now. Just getting this one mob down, as you say, resetting those cooldowns, so they can go into a big pull. Now the question is, how big do they go here? Because they can backtrack a tiny bit towards the towards Kragnar's room, and they can get a bit more trash. But as we say, generally speaking, you don't want to be padding backwards. So I like what Inertia are doing here. They're making sure they come out right on top of those mobs. MethodEU following suit, dragging how many is that? Yeah, that's a fairly sizable pull. I think they're doing roughly the same thing, getting those cooldowns off, watching that unholy DK damage that's going to be coming in any moment now. They're just waiting for those final mobs to come in, and then these mobs are going to get absolutely deleted, pushing all of that damage onto Sporecaller Zancho, making sure that boss can go down as quickly as possible for them.
What I did like to see is they let all of the bone shields go off, which just allows the mobs to have a little bit more health, which lets the DH funnel. Sorry, not the DK. I hate those two classes. Oof.
The DH
Which
can
lets the
funnel too if they
DK
want to.
funnel. Yeah, I guess sure, but
Nice
it's
bit of
not as
I-beam
impactful.
funnel.
Yeah, maybe. But it means that they've got the extra mob health to play with that they can use to funnel into the boss, as we see a lot of mushrooms going off on both sides, instantly getting revivaled off. One of the big perks of being a Mistweaver is you can revival all of the diseases in this dungeon away.
Unfortunately, the downside of Mistweaver being that you don't get brought to raid, but in an MDI setting, you are going to be brought every single time because they can do all kinds of cool tricks like this. One thing that we did see yesterday happen, I'm just noticing it now on our side of the screen, is the Twilight Devastation. We did have that incident, should we say, in King's Rest But I think we were discussing this before the stream, actually. Maybe that was a tactical play. We're talking a lot about funneling, making sure the DK can do as much prior damage as possible. Maybe he's intentionally aiming those Twilight Devies away from the most, so that he doesn't do as much damage to them and can let his DK do a little bit more pad.
Well, I mean, is it pad? Is it pad if it's funneling in single target, right? I mean, if he is, like, it could be a huge brain play, as you said. Like, if he is only using that Twilight Devi on those big pools to hit the boss or whichever single mob has the most health, it again allows the DK, I'll get it right this time after a second of brain lag, to be able to properly funnel, right, and funnel even more and even harder into their single target. And at the end of the day, the pool's only done when the last mob dies. So why would you not want to make the last mob die as quickly as possible?
This is very true. Looking at our two teams now, they are pretty much neck and neck. I mean, there's a few seconds difference from the beginning of the stream, that one death on the side of Inertia different. But at this point, this could be anyone's game. I'm looking at Inertia kill this final trash pack right now. They're going to be heading down. I'm pretty sure they killed the same amount of lieutenants, right? So we're going to be seeing 3 lieutenants on the final boss of both teams.
Yep, I believe that is correct.
We're going to have
Yeah,
the...
it looks like Inertia are going down a few seconds ahead even after the time delay. But it's literally only a few seconds. Neither of the teams, I believe, have lust. Maybe MethodEU are getting their lust up midway through this pull, but this is going to be a neck and neck last boss. I am really excited to see how this plays out.
It's like there's 3 lieutenants coming into this final boss. That Bloodlust will be coming up from MethodEU partway through. But Inertia have that advantage of pulling the boss slightly earlier. Will the Bloodlust make up for that? Possibly. We'll have to. So we do see them pulling the boss into the edge of the room. Now, this is something that a lot of people have varying opinions on. Should you pull the boss to the center? Should you pull it to the edge? Some people hold it right on the edge, but when he's throwing his spores out, sometimes they can clip onto the wall and they can just spawn right on top of you, and you want to make sure you avoid that. So I'm probably looking at Trell. Trell, don't pull it to the wall. I really want to see Trell moving it slightly more towards the center just to make sure there's no unfortunate mishaps that happen there. But right now, this is pretty much neck and neck. Teams in roughly the same position. And it looks like even their lieutenants are pretty much on exactly the same HP pool.
Yeah, this is a very close run boss fight. But as you said, I don't personally like pulling this boss right to the edge of the room because the goop on the ground does go away over time. Like, it does fade after a little while, to the point where if you're playing efficiently, you're pretty much never going to fill the entirety of the room, right? You're never going to move around it so quickly that it doesn't despawn before you get back to the point where you started. So I feel like it's a bit of a trap, like taking it right to the edge, because as you said, you get sideways spewage, and that's not fun for anyone.
Nobody wants a bit of sideways spewage. That's not going to be good for anyone. Jurassic going a little bit low on side of Inertia, but Fu saying that's totally fine. I can handle that. Looking at the ads, I'm just trying to see if anyone's tracking it anywhere specifically on their UIs, but I'm pretty sure that MethodEU are ever so slightly ahead in terms of killing their ads. I think maybe Inertia were focusing a little too hard. Oh no, Inertia are actually slightly ahead even. I was going to say Inertia were focusing a little too hard on their ads, but they are even slightly ahead of MethodEU now. There's a slight delay on the start time, so we're going to have to factor that in when these boss dies, because they're going to die at a very quick time. But it looks like MethodEU, I think, are going to take this. Going to get clarification from our admins, but
yeah, I think MethodEU eking it out slightly at the end there, as we do see Draz going down, which isn't going to help with that, but a very, very close run dungeon. But coins not working out. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's 3 at this point coins that have not worked out. Only
out of anyone.
Because I remember, the first series yesterday. I mean, MethodEU could have, and then they ended up pulling the tank buster at the very end of it. So they recognized they were ahead, and they recognized they didn't have to take that additional risk. So we'll see. Game number 3 to decide who moves on between MethodEU and Inertia. Get started right now.
Both teams here going straight to the left-hand side with that big pull. This is absolutely massive now, getting absolutely chunked. We see straight away Inertia already getting what I'm looking at as a full team wipe there. Unfortunately, didn't work out for them. MethodEU staying relatively strong. They have an absolutely huge losses. They're going to need to get that down. Otherwise, it's going to do some massive damage. But they have pulled this off very well. This pull Without Bloodlust, that many mobs, it can go south very, very quickly. This is going to be a very fast-paced dungeon as we go through here. MethodEU getting that skip into Priestess Room, likely going to be pulling everything into the boss there as Inertia go for the remains of that pull they just wiped on.
Yeah, as you said, that pull can go south very quickly, and it just did for Inertia, which is going to set them very far behind in this dungeon, as they're going to be behind on cooldowns. They're obviously behind in where they are in the dungeon as well, and MethodEU were obviously not showing any are not giving them any, mercy. They're just going ahead. They're pulling into the boss. They're getting a massive amount of damage down onto the priestess, and this pull looks very clean, very stable. I wouldn't expect this to be a particularly dangerous pull, but now actually dropping hugely low, getting rezzed, and healing the boss up a little bit with that transfusion.
Now, this is something that we saw in the underart from Inertia, right? The tank goes down early, they need to spend that combat res, and they don't have it later on when they actually need it. Ginger dropping low as well. It's not enough to kill him, but it's just very uncomfortable. Like we say, Zalia, very offensive player, likes to be doing the damage. Having to switch between that DPS and healing mentality very quickly can throw them off. We see some more deaths coming out on the side of Inertia here. I want them to recompose. I want them to get back into this, but at this point, they're just putting themselves further and further behind. I believe you can recover this, but we are going to see MethodEU dealing with Priestess and moving on to the next trash pack. Many different ways of handling this, right? The time trials showed us that the next section that's about to be pulled. There are so many different ways that you can do this. You can go for a snap. You can jump down to Rezan. You can stand in fire and die. Oh wait, no, you're not supposed to do that. I'm intrigued to see which one of those strategies the teams here are going to go for. It looks like they're not going to stand in the fire. Fantastic play, excellent choice. Grabbing these 4 mobs here, I'm assuming we're going to see, yep, that snap coming out from now. Unfortunate, Twilight Devi gets evaded. What is it with now and his Twilight Debbie RNG? He just can't get them at the right time, Dana.
I mean, what can he do really? He's trying. He's on. They're on Tournament Realm, obviously, so they've got past the RNG of. Oh, that's a big wipe coming out. Oh, that is unfortunate. This puts Inertia way back in the running. A few explosives going off, but it does look like MethodEU are going to be able to recover a little bit, and they're going down the middle and to pull probably more swords and try to recover.
If only he could have got that Twilight Devastation into those mobs and finished them off before that happened. I'm not 100% sure if Inertia are fully back in the game yet, but MethodEU, they seem to be regrouping, trying to figure out what they want to do. At this point, their whole route is broken, right? They were not anticipating this happening. The route basically plays out that they go onto that pillar, they kill that, they jump down to Rezan. They should be way into Rezan at this point, but it looks like they're just regrouping, recovering, trying to figure out how do we recover from this? What do we need to do? It looks like the pull that usually they would do after killing Rezan is the pull they're going to do now, or maybe they're just all going to try and commit the invis pots and get back to the pull, get back into the route. But they are definitely wasting a lot of time here. Inertia should be able to capitalize on this, but they're going to have to get to Priestess and start killing her very, very quickly. Just looking at the Bloodlust time, is no one popping Bloodlust at this point? Honestly, considering how far behind they are, I would have just popped it. I would have just popped it on whatever trash they were on, and then because we know they're going to get a second usage at this point because they're so far behind, MethodEU going for the same pull again. Fragments and Gingy not in the area yet. I think now's kind of going off on his own. They get into the pull now. Looking at Inertia, trying to figure out what their plan's going to be. Probably something similar to what MethodEU doing, but they need to speed this up, right? They need to be capitalizing on that mistake from MethodEU. They've recovered now. They're back in the same position they were, and let's see what Inertia can do.
Yeah, I think it's important after a wipe or multiple wipes that you take a second to regain your composure, right, and not get too flustered by wiping, because that will has a higher tendency of leading towards more chain wipes after the initial one, which obviously which takes you from being slightly behind to being in sort of a maybe unwinnable position if you end up wiping 3-4 times as Method are jumping down, pulling the rest of that middle pack into Razan and looking to do the boss from here. But as you said, they're still not committing their bloodlust, and I guess they're saving it all for the last boss. But as you said, at this point, they're probably going to get a second usage.
Definitely, I would have committed the second usage. I'm intrigued to see MethodEU's positioning. I was literally just about to comment before they did it, moving it towards a pillar they can actually LOS on. Those little sort of, don't know what to call them, that little bit of the building that juts out there. What would you call that? I don't even know what you call it, but the little triangle that juts out there doesn't actually work as an LOS spot, so they're going to be moving it towards the middle using this pillar here. Inertia have killed Priestess Alunza. They are going to be going into the pull that MethodEU just struggled on. Let's see if they can do it slightly more efficiently. At least I'm hoping they can do it more efficiently. Alternatively, what they could do is they could just try and go bigger. But it seems
They
like they're
could
going to
try
be
and
doing
pull it
something
all into Razan.
they could try and pull it all into Rezan. That would be very ballsy. If they did that and pulled it off, then fair play to them. It seems like they are getting a lot better explosive control here. With the explosive orbs, they only spawn if the mobs are not CC'd in any way. So on Trell's screen right now, I'm looking at the explosive counter. They only got, I think, 2 was the maximum they ever had. Oh, and look at that patrol timing. Rezan is right beneath them. They can just jump down right now, pull him, and get him into a fantastic position.
Yeah, this is a really, really nice patrol path for him. As I said, coming off the back of the wipes, I want to say it's kind of probably more luck than judgment, but sometimes it works out. Sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. And they are going into Razan. They're pulling him back towards the stairs straight away. So not opting to do what Method are doing and keeping them sort of near the middle of the room. I would imagine they're going to look to use a revival to get rid of one of these terrifying visages, assuming that Fu doesn't get nope, he doesn't get feared. It pops the revival. Everyone dropping really low, but it looks like they're about able to recover and carry on with the pull along with the Sky Screamers that they pulled from the top of the stairs.
Okay, so now I'd say we're probably at a point after all those wipes, everyone's kind of recovered, they're back in the pace of everything. We can probably start to judge who's ahead at this point. So trash count, fairly similar. MEU has the edge. Obviously, MEU has the boss advantage. I'd say maybe we're a minute or two behind. But again, we've seen MethodEU, if they make those mistakes, they can lose a chunk of like a huge chunk of time. Inertia not quite managing to capitalize on that, but who knows if that happens again, what that's going to do for MethodEU. Like I say, Bloodlust still not popped on either team, which is leading me to think maybe we will get to see those 4 lieutenant pulls. But in time trials, in the practice for those dungeons, it wasn't consistent. It really was a coin flip as to whether that would actually work or not for them. But at this point, I think Inertia has to. I don't
I,
think they can afford to not do that.
Yeah, I think Inertia has to at least try and go for it, right? To make up that, as you said, roughly a minute. They're still on Razan here. It has about 9 million health left as Method are making really good progress towards Vakal and the totems. And they've just got to make up this time, right? Like that at the end of the day, they've got to make up. And where does that come from? They've done it before. They've done 4 lieutenants on the boss before, so what's to say they're not going to just go for it again? I really hope they do.
I'd love to see it, but it can be a very dangerous pull, which I'm sure we can get to when we get there. Looking at MethodEU now, they're just finishing off these 3 totems here, spawning Volkal in. For a second there, I thought they weren't going to get the totems out at the same time, but they do manage to do it. Going to get them DPS and the boss down as Trell goes for the snap. He's dropping very, very low. He's not in range of Fu. Leprechaun coming out there at last second, but Trell is still very, very low. Need to be careful. We do get an explosive killing him there. Fu goes down. The rest of the team goes down as well. This is not what they need right now. So many explosive orbs spawning there. They just could not keep up with it. Maybe that was Trell going into the pull a little too early, though, because Fu wasn't in range of him, couldn't heal him. He couldn't get into the pull to leg sweep. There was no way that he could back Trell up. Maybe they're just going to go
Yeah,
for the same pull again. At this point, they just seem lost. I think they've been thrown like MethodEU was in the first 2 series, and I think as unless MethodEU has something absolutely catastrophic happen, I don't know if they can get it back at this point. I hate to say it because I want to see them do really well, but the game is not over yet.
it is indeed not. There's a lot of things that can happen, and there's still a couple of bosses to go, and the lieutenants, right? Method, I don't believe have done any lieutenants. I think actually Inertia did the interrupt lieutenant on the way up to Priestess's room, so I think they're only going to have to deal with 3 at maximum. So maybe they are able to gain an advantage there, though. I think at this point, Method can afford to be safe. They can afford to take the Spirit Break Lieutenant on the way up to the final boss, and just play for consistency, right? Play to finish without any more, as you said, any more catastrophes. Because at this point, I think it is going to take a catastrophic event to let Inertia win this, as they again wipe on these Sorid packs. They're proving a little bit trickier than I think they would have hoped.
was gonna say it's that explosive RNG. They're just getting too many of them, and they can't handle them. So they're gonna be pulling one pack this time, just making sure they can get through it. But they really need to be grabbing these all together, stunning them, and then not having to worry about all these explosive orbs, getting them down in one go. But this is also fine, splitting them up, just playing it safe at this point, just getting past this block that they seem to have on this section. MethodEU now heading towards the final boss. They are grabbing one of the lieutenants. Perhaps their plan originally was to go for all four, or maybe this was always part of the plan. I like this pathing though. As you're running up towards this final boss, there's not really anything to do, so you may as well try and pull something in. In the past, we've seen this be the Sky Screamer that's on the top there. They've just grabbed that to get the final bit of percentage. Not 100% sure on the placement. I don't like that they put this portal right in the middle of the spiders because, if you're nervous, if you're a little bit shaky, you can easily run into one of these. And we have seen players die in tournaments before to this. But they managed to get through 3 lieutenants on the final boss with Bloodlust. See how they deal with this. Now, you were mentioning earlier that Inertia had killed the spider boss, the spider lieutenant, sorry, which means they have one less interrupt to deal with on this final boss compared to MethodEU, on top of the blood pool as well. They do take the tank mob out, though. Now getting a fantastic Twilight Devastation there. More of those, please, now. How... where do you think of the pressure points on this final boss with these lieutenants? Do you think it's going to be Zalia that's having to focus more on healing? Do you think it's now survivability? Or do you think it's just pump raw damage and everyone's going to be fine?
I think it's a mixture of both, right? Like, obviously, the sooner the lieutenants go down, primarily this the fear guy, you're going to have a much lower amount of damage going out on everyone. Like, there's a lot of movement here as well, though, and that only gets worse the longer the fight goes on because of how frequently the spiders spawn. So again, the sooner they can get rid of these lieutenants, the better it is going to be for all of them. But it looks like they haven't really had an issue, and now it's just double interrupts that they have to deal with. And realistically, that should be the easiest part of this fight, as they have CC rotation going down for the ads that spawn, and the last lieutenant goes down, and now it's just a bog standard Yasma fight, which they should be absolutely fine with.
I mean, I've experienced some absolutely hairy live keys where it's just this final boss on its own and it's gone absolutely south. The method you should have no problems dealing with this. Let's have a quick check in with Inertia before we go back to Method EU. They're still in Volcal. I believe they've just got into the second phase of him. So they're pretty behind at this point. It would require probably about 2 team wipes from MEU to get ahead. But they're going to plow on nonetheless. They're going to see how far into this dungeon they can get. Unfortunate, they had such a fantastic start to this series, and it's just a shame that in this final dungeon, they couldn't capitalize on that. Maybe MethodEU just managed to throw them with the coin. Maybe they were thinking that because MethodEU have been so vocal about trying to save it for the finals, that they would be into Junkyard, and that's maybe where they'd put all their practice time. MethodEU does not get dethroned, unfortunately. They are going to finish Yasma here, and they are done with the dungeon.